Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
All right. Welcome to the first episode of Mustache Tales with Jay and Hayes. Our first guest is Kevin Heffernan.
Wow.
The great writer, director, actor from the hit comedy group Broken Lizard.
This is an honor.
Yeah. First guest. So I first met Kevin. Actually, I heard about Kevin when I was a freshman at Colgate University, and he was in the coolest dorm, right? You were in Andrews, right, Kevin?
I was, yeah. That was a good dorm.
Yeah, everybody was like, Andrews is the cool dorm. You know, I hung out at a cool dorm across the quad called East Hall, but I was actually living in a dorm called the Harlem Renaissance Center because they're like, let's put all the dark people in the same spot and maybe they'll feel welcome. So I was hanging out up the hill at East Hall, and everyone's like, we were starting to sort of think about pledging fraternities. And so I kept hearing about this Andrews crew. And there was like a Boston guy and a Connecticut guy. Kevin was a Connecticut guy. And everyone's like, man, this guy's the funniest guy in the class. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, bullshit. I'm the funniest guy in the fucking class. And so I heard about him a couple times. And I'm like, I probably saw him walking around. I'm like, he doesn't look that funny. And then I met him for the first time in the foyer of our fraternity house, Beta, when we were freshmen. And we're going around we were in a semicircle and we were all saying who we were. And I'm like, oh, there's that funny guy from Andrews, supposedly funny guy. And I'm like, I don't think he's, whatever. And they were making fun of him. The pledge masters were making fun of him for eating too many potato chips or something. I'm like, yeah, you do eat a few too many potato chips. And then eventually we became, we were in the same pledge class and we became close friends. And I was like, this guy is funny. This guy is funny. In fact, there's empirical proof that he's funny because senior year, the senior class voted on the funniest people in the class. And Kevin won number one funniest in the class, and I won number two. And as a result, Kevin had to give the speech, and I got to get hammered.
It's just because I was the fat guy. Like my freshman year, my roommate, I kind of stumbled across. He had written a letter home to his mom, like a homesick letter. And I saw it on his desk, and I picked it up, and he was describing his roommates, And at the end of it, he goes, and finally, there is a fat jolly fellow from Connecticut that is my roommate. And
you feel the weight was your competitive edge.
Was that Andrews Hall? They would have like a pie eating contest. Like that was like a freshman event. They would have like a pie eating contest, and then you would, put your best pie eater up, And so I remember all the dorms were standing around this field, and it came time to decide who was going to be the pie eater. And then everyone turned, they looked at me like I was, for some reason, visually the best pie eater that you could have. And I was trying to explain to them that it doesn't correlate, like pie speed eating doesn't correlate necessarily to the fatness of it. It's just that the way it is. And I fucking lost. I lost that pie eating contest.
That's terrible.
I love that you sized him up. Your competitiveness, Jay, came out for humor and not toughness. Like you went into a new environment and you're like, who's the funniest guy here? And then immediately you don't like that person and you start gunning for them.
Sure.
Most guys, they get to a new environment. They're like, who's the toughest guy here? That's who I want to take a shot at. And you go, who's the funniest guy here? I'm going to beat him. And then there's an actual competition. And you lost it.
That's right. I lost it. And it's pretty incredible. I mean, also, Kevin had a manager once, and there was a little Hollywood craze going around about everyone's always trying to lose weight in Hollywood. And you somehow got in a conversation with your manager about losing weight. Do you remember what he said?
Yeah, he said, don't lose weight. Fat is funny and funny's money. He's like, well, let's not get too thin, okay? Because fat is funny and funny is money.
It does so much of the work for you.
And no concern for my health or my well-being.
When we started the group, what happened was that I was in a bunch of plays. I was in like Job, and I played Job in Job. I was in like Arthur Miller plays and whatever. And Kevin
He's
was.
in the theater gang.
I wasn't in the theater group.
I'd love to see your audition for Biff.
I played Biff in high school.
Everybody plays Biff.
Yes.
It's the one you want.
So it was. I went to Chicago for a semester off, and I got involved with the Improv Olympic, and Chris Farley was there at the time, and I came back to Colgate, bragging about how good I was at improv and how I knew this guy Chris Farley, and now he's going to Saturday Night Live. I was like the king of Chicago, according to my telling. And one of the guys who started the Kinetic Theater Group, who's now a writer on Succession, a guy named Jonathan Glatzer, he said he was going to London for the semester, and he said, "Hey, why don't you start a comedy group? You were talking about Chicago and how much a big improviser you are. Why don't you start one at Colgate and for my theater group?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe I will do that." Right. So the first guy I go to is Kevin Heffernan, and I walk into his room on the second floor of our fraternity house. And, whatever, it's on like a Tuesday night, and he's just, sitting there waiting for Wednesday morning. And I was like, "Hey, man."
Staring at a wall.
Yeah, staring at the wall, letting time click away. And I was like, "Hey, you want to start a comedy group? Like I did in Chicago?" And he goes, "Comedy group? Why the hell we do a comedy group?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We could be like, like Chris Farley." He goes, "You know how cynical our friends are? They're just going to laugh at us." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking." So I tell the guy, I'm like, "Nah, I'm not doing it." And he goes, "What? Okay." So now the summer comes, and he calls me from New York somewhere, and he goes, "Man, I got 3 one-act plays. I need a 4th because I'm going to be in London to keep this whole theater group going. Do the comedy group." And I'm like, "I will do the comedy group." I just come back from a Grateful Dead show where I'd tripped for 4 days in a row at Alpine Valley. So my head was a little soft, right? And I call Kevin, and he's at a dishwashing job in Nantucket, which he got fired from in a week, by the way, which he thinks is a weightism. And I call Kevin, and he's in his Nantucket fucking house. And I said, we're going to do the comedy group. And he goes, "I already told you we're not doing the comedy group. We're not doing it. I'm not doing a fucking comedy group." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. We're not doing a fucking comedy." So I called the guy. I'm like, "We're not doing a comedy group." So then now it's fall. And it's like a Monday night in the fall. We're in the fraternity house, senior year. I'm downstairs drinking, and the phone rings, and some pledge is like, "Hey, there's some guy from London calling you on the fucking payphone." I'm like, great. So I pick up the payphone. He goes, "You're doing the comedy group. It's a done deal. I need a 4th. It's a done deal." I'm like, "All right, fine." So I walk up to Kevin's room. He's still looking at the wall 2 years later, 6 months later. And I'm like, "We're doing a comedy group. It's a done deal. It's a done deal." And he goes, "Fine, fuck it, I'll do it." And that's how we started.
Then you got the other guys. You all went over to the London show, and you just started with a long form improv. No plan.
Well, we put up signs, and we and basically I went around like the Magnificent Seven and walked around to the funniest people we knew, because Colgate wasn't at the time a big theater group company, play theater. There weren't a bunch of real funny theater people.
There was no improv.
We just found funny people and said, "Do you want to put on a comedy show?" And some people were like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I'm just a funny guy. I'm not going to do a comedy show." But enough people said yes. And, 4 or 5 of us are in the group still.
The improv circuit almost replaced graduate school for theater. People started going to like Groundlings and Improv Olympic and Second City right after college. Yeah. And that wasn't around when we were in school. It was just a rare art form. And then everyone started going, like the theater would open in New York and all the kids from school would go there. They started putting out, every college had an improv group.
We had our own group, so it was, I think a lot of kids go to New York, LA, and they join those schools or whatever. We had like 9 people or whatever. We had our own little team, and we had our own little improv school, I guess.
We started as an improv group, and we were doing all these all these like games and like long form Herald. And as you can imagine, there were 9 of us in a room. The expert was me, and I was the worst improviser in Chicago when I left. And I'm like, everyone's like, is this
Not that
funny?
good.
And I'm like, I don't think so. Is this funny? I don't know. Is this funny? And we were like, this is not funny. And so we decided instead to switch to something we could control, which is sketch, because we were all English and history majors, largely political science majors. And we're like, we can write 30-page papers. We can write how long's a sketch? 4 pages? Okay, we can write that. And so we started writing these sketches, and there was a need because the sketches had like elaborate costumes, like mermaid costume and banana costume. And an actor would have to change from one to the other to be in the next thing. And we're like, oh, we need a diversion. And so we started making these short films in between so that we could change from banana to mermaid. And plus, it was a little more like Saturday Night Live, which is really what we wanted to do.
You're doing, and people are, it's a rep theater, essentially. You had everyone play different roles.
Yeah.
You would put up a show and change in between it. Did you have internal strife over who would play what roles? Like you're competitive with each other.
I don't think so. Did we?
No, we have a credo or a motto in Broken Lizard, which is somebody asks who wrote the joke, you say we all wrote it. And so the concept is really like, look, we're all going to try to balance out, we're all going to have enough funny parts. And we'll just, I just sort of cast it at the end based on who could be available for what scene and who wanted to do what scene.
And then you start traveling. You don't start traveling with the film that you make until that was well after school. When you guys made a feature-length film, it came off of those shorts.
Yeah, we did shorts for a few years while we did stage shows in New York, and so and then we ultimately made like a half-hour film. Jay went to NYU film school for a little while, like a summer type thing, and then we just started making. We made like a half an hour film, and then we pushed until we made a feature. That was.
And you were doing Super 16? Like, it was hard to make films. It wasn't an easy process. You were shooting.
Well, it wasn't that day of video. If you had a video, it was like a VHS camera where you put the VHS tape in the top of the camera and you carry it around like that. So we shot on 16, and then we shot our first feature on 35, which was a unique thing at that time because it was so expensive.
Yeah, Clerks had made it their thing for. It was black and white 16 because it was cheap. God, I remember the cruel New York Times review for Clerks. It said it's a great movie, but it looks like it was shot through a tube sock, which is unfair. I mean, this guy's first movie. But when we saw that, we were like, well, we don't want people to think we look like we shot through a tube sock. So we really thought maybe the thing that'll knock us over the top will be that we're on 35 like a real movie.
When I went to Los Angeles, I met a guy. He was shorter than me. He was 5'4". His name's Jason Weiner. He was my best friend. We went out all the time together to bars. We'd run around. We had the same group of friends, kind of similar thing. We just we're just running around, out of work actors in LA. And he said to me, I want to make a short film called The Adventures of Big Handsome Guy and His Little Friend. I said, well, what is it? He said, we're just going to tell the story of us going out. I go, why? He goes, because you're out to have a couple drinks and I'm out to meet girls. And at the end of the night, you're just always ready to go home and I want to meet chicks. So we're going to make a film about that.
Sounds like Swinger.
So we got it. It was right after Swinger. That was like a big thing. We were in all those bars. We wanted to romanticize those bars, but it was hard to make it look good. We couldn't shoot it on digital because it looked like a video camera at the time. So we shot Super 16. That was a huge expense for us at the time. And I entered a stand-up comedy competition in LA. They started as like bringer shows where you'd have to bring like 15 friends to watch you do like 4 minutes of horrible comedy. And there were multiple rounds, but the guy hosting it was making a ton of money because he had all these LA comics that wanted to perform in front of people and you had to pay to do it.
Right.
So it ended up with a final show at the Friars Club. And if you won the Friars Club competition, you got $1,500. So the Friars Club holds like a couple thousand people. We have this big event. Weiner wants to make this film. We stack the entire audience with all of our friends, and we stack the vote. It was
Yeah.
it was a corrupt thing. I win the stand-up comedy competition. I get the cash on stage, and I'm ready to go right to the bar. Weiner grabs the cash out of my hands and goes to the Federal Credit Union of SAG and opens a bank account, and we start raising money to shoot on film. Once we got the money together to make it, like friends and family, we raised, I think, like, $22,000. And it took us a year and a half to write a 15-page script.
Yeah.
And then we went and got our friends to be in it. And we went to the film festivals with this 17-minute short film about a night out on the town of these two guys. He meets the love of his life, and I essentially ruin it for him.
Yeah.
And for a year, we drove the film around to these film festivals, and then a network saw it, Fox saw it, and they ended up having us make a pilot based on the short film. And the budget for the pilot was millions of dollars. And literally, they gave us like $2.5 to $3 million to make this 17, and we were only making 6 minutes more.
Yeah.
And there was a shot in the short film. We were at Angel's Flight, is this hill downtown, and it's got this crest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we conceived of this shot where, because I'm taller, we're coming over the crest of the hill, and you see my head first, and then you see Weiner's head after mine. And I throw a can over my shoulder, and as we're coming over the hill, he runs back and picks it up and throws it in the trash because he's the responsible one.
Right.
So right before we did this one take, there was a homeless guy feeding pigeons in the park. And I gave the homeless guy $5 so he could have a bunch of pigeons at the base of the hill. So where we come over the hill in slow motion, you just see like this explosion of birds, like something, you'd have to pay. It was a John Woo. It was a John Woo shot. So we did that, and it looked amazing in the short film on Super 16. So there I was standing on the same hill 2 years later with this huge network production, and they wanted to recreate the pigeon shot that we had. And I look down at this pigeon wrangler who's hiding behind the hill with these cages of pigeons, and I go, "Hey man, how much does this cost? How much are you getting paid for this?" And he goes, $17,000. And I go, "That's how much our whole film costs." So when we were coming over the hill on the pilot, he opens up the pigeon cages, and like 2 birds flew out.
Yeah.
We couldn't get any of them to come out, and it didn't go. Everyone liked the short better.
What happened with they never picked it up?
Yeah, we just got to make a pilot, like wearing the exact same clothes, doing the exact same scenes in the pilot as we did in the short.
Well, we had the same thing in the sense that we made a movie called Puddle Cruiser, which is a college movie, went to Sundance, and then when it got to the point, we had, I think it was NBC, right, that was interested in redoing it. And same exact situation. They bought it. We shot a pilot, but they thought that we looked too old. And so they made us recast the whole movie with guys that looked like us. And we shot a pilot of our movie with a bunch of guys.
With other guys?
Younger guys that looked like us.
With your pretty boy avatars?
And it ended up being a funny thing because each guy had a guy that looked like them, And I remember being at the rap party and squaring off against my younger, fatter version of myself, and
Right.
drinking against him and that kind of stuff.
Kevin destroyed this guy in the drinking contest. Yeah, the poor kid was just an actor trying to like fit in, and everyone was just pushing him to try to come up against the movie version, Kevin. And Kevin was a professional binge drinker at the time, and he destroyed this young man, and then paid the price himself.
I love thinking there's a bizarro Broken Lizard group out there somewhere.
Yeah, we shot it, and we didn't go. It was the year that Freaks and Geeks came out, right? Wasn't that it? They got the slot.
Yeah, that's right.
And we didn't get picked up. They got picked up.
So that was the pilot of Puddle Cruisers,
Yeah.
and then you guys are like, "Fuck this, let's go make another version of it with Super Troopers where we'll play ourselves."
Let's go make this let's go make a movie that we can act in.
We're trying to be Monty Python, and so the idea, the whole concept of 5 of us writing a television show for 5 other guys or whatever it was, it's insane. Now that I worked on so much television, I'm like, that's not how you make a TV show. It's just not how it works. And by the way, you don't give like a bunch of 25-year-olds, 30, $50 million for a season of television. I mean, we didn't even know how to do any of it. We were just like, I don't know. But ultimately, they made the right decision in not giving it to us, I believe. And then we were like, well, we want to be Python. We got to make another movie. And then, Miramax.
But you're doing it on 30. You're doing it on 35, and you rob a bank to get the cash, or
For
how
Super
are you
Troopers?
financing that? Yeah.
Well, what happened was Harvey Weinstein was a big fan of the first film we made, Puddle Cruiser. And he almost bought it. He almost bought it. Then we had screenings, and he'd never show for the screening. He'd only show up for the comment after. And then we would do these sort of test screenings in Greenwich Village, and it'd be full of film students, and the place is exploding with laughter. And he wouldn't come to that part. He'd just come to the part where the students talk about it. And the students would all see him in the room, and they'd all become, just Pauline Kael. They were all trashing the movie. I think that's part of his sentence was for not coming to the actual screening, part of the time he's doing right now. But he kept hearing how great we were. And then he saw the film on video, and he's like, I love this movie. And I was like, buy it. And he goes, I'm not going to buy it. He goes, I'll make a TV show. I'm like, we already tried that. So then he's like, basically says, why don't we make a new one? And we were like, okay. And so his head of development or head of production, this guy named Jack Leshner, sat us down, and we're like, what should we do the movie about? He goes, that's your job. You tell me. He goes, I don't give a fuck what you guys do. You guys are super funny. You could make a movie about a cat in space for all I care. And we're like, okay. So we then decide together, we're like, he said we should do a movie about a cat in space. Let's do a movie about a cat in space. And so we wrote this whole pitch called Mickleberry, Cat in Space. And it's about the United States is going to send a cat into, I guess we're going to play the fucking scientist. I don't know. Send a cat into space. And the Chinese hear about it, and they're like, this must be one smart cat. So they try to get their own cat going into space. And there's a space race to see who can, and everyone's, and there's a gravity thing with like ping pong balls, and the cat's floating, banging the ping pong balls. And everyone realizes these cats aren't that good enough to go into space. The Chinese kidnap the cat because they're like, this must be the smartest cat in the world. And then they realize this cat doesn't know shit. So they let the cat go on the streets, and we get the cat back. Anyway, whatever. So we go into Miramax to the head of production. Now, this is Miramax when they're at their muscular peak. They're winning Oscars like crazy. And the Jack Leshner's like, what do you got for me? We're like, open on NASA. A cat walks by. And he's like, he goes, are you guys fucking with me? And we're like, no, you said do a movie about a cat in space. And he goes, I said, what the fuck are you? We're not going to do. You want me to do a Harvey Weinstein with a cat in space movie? We're like, no. We're just, yeah. He said, come up with a new idea. And we're like, okay, fine.
And it took you forever. You break the story, you've beat it out, you've got your act break. You're like, this is it in 5 minutes.
Song and dance, we got the whole thing down.
Well, everyone had a part. And then finally we just go to a wedding on the Vermont border, and we were driving home. We were like way up on the border, Lake Averill. And we're driving home, and we drive by some kids who'd been pulled over by the Vermont police. And at the time, gangster rap was huge. And so, it was all these like white kids in basements saying, yo, fuck the police, right? All that shit, right? Like you'd see that at like parties, and you're like, all right.
That's gone away.
Yeah. Yes. And so we're driving by these kids, and we're like, it's really funny how white kids are so fuck the police, trying to be all street. And then when they get in front of the cop, they're like, yes, sir, right? And so we thought, oh, that could be, maybe we could be the cops. And then we're like, oh, there's no crime up here in Vermont. Maybe they mess with people and we could do pranks. And that was sort of the beginning of that idea. And we wrote that script for Miramax.
Driving back from the border.
At the end of it, Harvey Weinstein read it. And Jack Leshner was like, it's going to be a green light, guys. It's going to be a green light. And Harvey reads it and he goes, I mean, everyone says it's hilarious, but I'm not very good at figuring out what's hilarious. So I'm not going to make it, but I am going to let you have it back. And he goes, which is really generous of me. And I said, well, okay. So he said, good luck. And then we went on a 2-year odyssey of trying to get everybody else to finance the movie.
Like about every single comedy person in the world was attached at some point, right? Bob Simons, the Fairley Brothers, George Clooney was a producer at one point. We would walk into these rooms and people were like, who's going to star in it? We are. And who's going to direct it? He is. And they're like, fuck you. See you later.
Which is really, we went to every independent financier and they were like, it's a good script, but you guys aren't going to be in it. One of them was like, I'll give you the money, but Ben Affleck has to play Thorny. And I'm like, that's my part. And he goes, not in this picture, kid. And I was like,
But you had already gone through the pilot process of, that kind of serves you, right? Because you already saw it didn't work when other actors were doing your guys' roles and chemistry.
Yeah.
That allows you to stick to your guns.
I didn't get in the business to make some role for some other guy. I wanted to do it, So
yeah, we were kind of like, at this point, Eric Stolhansky had moved to LA to basically go, well, if this is not going to work out, I'll just go try to be an actor. And Steve Lemmy and I were also moving to LA. Kevin had a law degree, so he was going to stay in New York and be a lawyer. And I was packing up the Broken Lizard office, closing it down in New York, when the phone rang. And we had struck out on every independent financier, right? The phone rang and it's my friend Cricket Langell. And she goes, look, I know you're sort of in show business, she said. And I'm like, barely, Cricket, barely. And he goes, but my dad's an investment banker and he retired and he wrote a script. Would you mind talking to him about reading it or something? And I'm like, sure. Because Cricket is a total fox. And I'm like, I'll do anything if this could lead to something. So I'm like, so I get on the phone.
I'll read your dad's script, baby.
Hey, I'll read your dad's script. I'm sort of in show business. I get on the phone with her dad, Pete Langell, and he goes, so you guys write funny scripts or something? And I'm like, yeah, we've written a couple. And he goes, oh, I wrote one too. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I really don't want to read this script, right? But I'm like, okay. And he goes, why don't you send me one of your scripts so I see if it's even worth getting your opinion? So he's auditioning us to fucking read a script. And I'm like, Cricket's really hot. I'm going to send him the goddamn script, right?
He's probably looking at it too for like, where does all the spacing go? And like, how does dialogue fit? What's the format? Yeah, he didn't have like.
So I send him the script. And 2 weeks later, he calls me up and he goes, funny script. And I said, oh, thanks. And I'm waiting for him to say, I'm going to send you my script. But he goes, what's going on with it? And I'm like, well, I mean, we've kind of given up at this point. Like, we're moving.
Oh,
Kevin's not going to be in show business anymore. I'm like, well, we're raising money. And he goes, how much you need? And I said, $1.2 million. And he goes, all right, let's do it. And I was like, what? I don't know if it's, I mean, I don't even know. I don't know. So I go to my producer's office. I'm like, there's a guy who wants to give us $1.2 million. Yeah. And my producer's like, bullshit. And
$1.2 million is just specific enough. It's like $1 million's too general, but $1.2 million sounds like it was thought out.
Exactly. And that's it. That's how we made the movie. We made it with $1.2 million. I mean, $1.26 million. I put 30 grand in, and my producer put 30 grand in credit cards. And Kevin was rescued from a life of reading legal briefs.
It was, yeah.
Oh, I just think of all the clients that are so thankful, Kevin, that you didn't become a lawyer and
Yes,
represent
they would have
them.
had a lot of good laughs in the courtroom, I think.
A funny lawyer. Those are two things you don't want in the same profession. A guy with a legal degree who likes to crack jokes at the audience of a
Like I would
courtroom.
crack them in law school, and the professors would be like, "No, this is not the place."
Yeah.
For that."
We're a literal medium here.
Sorry.
Kevin was a paralegal. He was a paralegal for our friend Andy McCormick, who is a good friend of ours from Colgate, who's a lawyer. And so Andy hired him as a paralegal. Andy was a lawyer at this place. And we would all go out till 4 a.m. and get absolutely just wasted, right? And in the morning, Kevin would have to go to his job, and he would walk into Andy McCormick, our fraternity brother's office, and he'd be like, all right, get under the desk. And Kevin would take a little cat nap under Andy's desk while Andy would be up there working, And then he'd come up at noon and be like, okay, I'm ready. Give me some files to do something.
Yeah, lawyers would walk into his office to talk to him, and I was like hidden on the floor, just sleeping.
That's how you learned habeas corpus.
Yeah, that's where I got my legal chops.
Those first couple jobs out of school, man, I mean, it's just a disaster. You're trying to transition into the real world. There's structure. You have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
I worked the transportation for the Atlanta Olympics. So we were in charge of, it was like logistically, it's not something you can just pop into. You're in charge of moving thousands of people around. There's judges, there's international athletes. It was this group called ACOG, the Atlantic Committee for the Olympic Games. So it was like very official. And we were all like 18 and 19 years old in charge of dispatching buses to these events. And they took taxi drivers from all over the South and brought them to Atlanta to drive around. No GPS, no satellite. They gave everyone linear maps. Like here's where you pick up the person and here's where you drop them off. And we're in a tower with like microphones and walkie-talkies saying, okay, bus from Blue 2, you're going down to Peachtree Road. And then the Olympic bombing happened and they ended up closing off a lot of the streets. So the linear maps became like obsolete because once a street was blocked, the driver got off the road and he had no frame of reference of how to get to where he needed to go. So we started when we're in the tower over the radio, hearing all these tragic stories about like the shot put thrower who trained their whole life for this event, showing up 5 minutes before they had to get the shot put, or the Korean judges not being able to get to the diving competition because they couldn't get, they were like lost somewhere in Buckhead. And it was just a bunch of idiots in a tower trying to navigate these drivers back to their events.
And they just hired 18-year-olds because it was fucking cheaper? Is that what it came down to?
They were just like they just started employing anyone for any job during the Olympics and plugging them into places.
And you didn't give a shit. You were going out drinking and whatever it was.
We were out all night and we would show up or we worked the night shift in the tower and we'd be, just like hanging out in the tower, drinking beers and smoking and having fun. But to me, the stakes felt like I was in like an air traffic control tower. Yeah. That was like the setting, but it was a little lower because they were just buses lost. So you guys go Super Troopers. You keep doing it. Quasi is now the latest of what started in that when Jay was competitive with you, Kev, of being the funniest guy. This is now
we're on the same team, but in my view, if I'm being really honest, people are a little more excited to see Kevin than they are me. Just a little. I can hear him just a little louder. I can still feel it. A little funnier. I
know nothing about Quasi. I only heard that you guys were making it, and I heard you directed it, right, Kevin? That's a first for you guys to do a movie where.
Second, Kevin directed the film The Slammin' Salmon, which is our waiting tables movie.
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago. Well, no, was it 15 years ago? Jesus. But I directed one in the past. So this is number 2 for me for Broken Lizard.
But we were together on all the films, sort of prepping them. He was prepping every single one of how many films have we made? 8? 7?
We've made 7 proper Broken Lizard films. We've done,
and then a stand-up special.
We did a stand-up special, and we've done obviously other things.
Tacoma was more recent, but that was something that you and Steve did.
Yeah.
Or you directed those episodes.
Yeah, but basically he was with me as we were prepping Super Troopers Beerfest. Like we were there, we were together. And then more importantly though, is we'd go into the edits together and we would cut these, we'd hire an editor, but we would, the way to become, in my view, a great comedy director is to sit in the editing room and actually, like watch all the footage and write this take right here has a funny look from Lemmy, and this take has a great little riff from Soder and Stolhansky, and you put it all together, and then we sit in that room and we just would go, God, this fucking director, which was me at the time, just framed this a little too tight, and now the shot sucks, and we would just get mad at me, and we would, and the anger makes you learn. Right? It makes you go, next time, I'm not going to fucking do so tight, and it makes you learn and to get, and so when it was time to do the Slam and Salmon, he was just fully ready.
That was, what, 2008, I think it was. We made that one.
During the strike.
Yeah. But this one, we had written this film Quasi back the same time we wrote the Super Trooper script. So we wrote it like 30 years ago, or whatever it was, 25 years ago. And it had just been sitting on a shelf, and it was just this kind of goofy movie that we based on a character that Lemmy used to do. And he used to have this like guy that he worked with who was this lonely, sad kind of guy. And it was this character he started doing, and then he turned it into this hunchback character that he would do. And so we're like, fuck it, we should write this movie about this thing. So we wrote this movie about this hunchback who gets into this conflict with the Pope and the King. And it just sat there for like 25 years, and every once in a while we take it out and we dust it off, and it's like, nobody's going to do a period piece with us, and nobody's going to, and then after Super Troopers 2, we had this little kind of window where the studio Searchlight was like, okay, let's make another Super Troopers. Well, what else do you guys have? What do you have in the meantime? And we kind of dusted the script off and said, hey, we got this one, never thinking that someone would spark to it, because it's a fucking, it's people in robes and shit. You know what I mean? It's a fucking period piece in medieval times.
I've been describing it as like a 12th century French political thriller with a lot of blood.
Yeah, and fart jokes, and so the studio come back and say, wow, we really love this, and so we kind of fast tracked it, and then Lemmy had a window between seasons for our show Tacoma, and Jay was working on Easter Sunday at the time, his film, and then it just kind of we rushed it into production, and I think we put one over on them, and they gave us the opportunity to shoot the thing. So we
did. You guys shoot it during whatever this phase of COVID we're in? Like,
it was the second surge. So it was 2021. It was the fall of 2021. And that was
Omicron.
Part of it. It was the Omicron thing. Yeah, that was part of it. In that, I think there was a lot of challenges to production, and basically we had our whole TV crew, and they were sitting on the sidelines waiting for the new season to start.
Right.
And literally, we just said, let's take locations and every production design, and all our people were sitting there. Let's just move them over, and we'll make this movie shoot it in 6 weeks. And so we did it. So we put these wigs on and these robes, and we went up to Santa Clarita and built a medieval village, and we shot there for 6 weeks.
Like, to be able to do that during that time, I didn't see a lot of friends for that first year at all. And just to get back into a production element with the whole crew must have been awesome.
It was great. And, it was also a movie, obviously, that we had written for a while and had been talking about trying to make for years and years and years. And it was in this vein of Monty Python, where it was like, hey, people know us as the Super Troopers or Beerfest or whatever. Let's do a movie where we play multiple characters, which we do. We all play multiple characters in the thing. And let's do a movie where we have silly accents and wigs. And so that became an extra really fun thing to do amongst us, I think, to get out
there.
Because
there's not been a period piece like you develop the whole world.
Yeah.
You're in a medieval village with costumes.
Yeah. So we built a medieval French village in Santa Clarita, and we kind of banged it out. And and the studio ended up loving it. I mean, it has a different kind of vibe to it, and than Super Troopers, for example. You know, I think.
And so where's it living now? Where's
So
it coming out?
we made the deal during the pandemic, and so there was no such thing as a theatrical release then. So we made this deal with Hulu, where basically Searchlight is the studio, and they had a kind of a deal with Hulu, and so on 4/20, which is was our Super Troopers 2 date. Also, we own that date, 4/20.
Yeah,
gonna,
Michael Bay has the 4th of July. You
right,
guys have
we have
4/20.
So it's going to premiere on Hulu on 4/20. The world can see it.
It's a good weed smoking movie. Well, I mean, look.
Chandrasekhar with his, I mean, come on, look at that.
Steve Lemmy's a peasant hunchback. I play the King of France. Kevin plays the Hand of the King. Paul Soter plays the Pope, and Eric Stolhansky plays the Hand of the Pope, to whatever that is.
So you guys, you've been working together this long. When one of you comes up with a character, you're like, all right, I'm going to play the Pope like this. Is it by committee, or do they have like artistic license? All right, no,
it's a little of both. It was definitely a little bit both. Like, they had something they wanted to do, like Soder wanted to be a white-haired guy, like he wanted to be one of those kind of like almost albino-y kind of,
yeah.
And yeah, sure. That sounds like a great idea. I mean, we read the scripts out loud, and and people work on their characters, and we'll sit around a table and we'll hey, why don't you try this, or maybe this accent. I mean, Lemmy, his character as a hunchback was hard because he had multiple ways that he could go. He could go with a French accent. He could go with whatever, and he at one point it was a lisp, of course, and then and so we kind of settled on this kind of Alan Arkin, or no, not Alan Arkin. Peter Falk, kind of a Peter Falk imitation he does.
A Columbo vibe?
Yeah, it's got a really kind of like this kind of a thing, And it took a second for us to settle into that, but it ended up working really well. But it took a while for him to find that, and we were all working together with him and figuring out how to do what the voice is going to be, that kind of stuff.
Lemmy, in my view, is the best actor in Broken Lizard. Like he's got this natural charisma that somehow could make this like odd-mouthed hunchback Peter Falk imitation kind of sexy and cool and fun. I just think he's great in this movie. I really am like, and it's amazing because the character was a guy he worked with at a record store who was, in the guy's own opinion, he goes, it's a hot summer in New York City, and I'm just sitting around in my apartment, sweaty, losing again. No girls want to go out with me, I guess. So I'll just sit here for all summer and sweat. And you're like, and he would do this imitation. You're like, God, that is so funny. And so he turned him into a hunchback.
Yeah.
Didn't you talk about, Jay told me once that some of the guys would take, as you guys were making the movies, guys would take acting classes at certain points.
Yeah.
And you could see you guys like pulling off. It's a technical thing when you're pulling off jokes in films, and you start doing it, you get known for it, you want to get good at it, and then you start trying to learn something that you've already been doing naturally.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to do in front of your friends.
It wasn't, some of the guys, they were talking about, and I think Stolhansky or somebody did it like after the fact, going back and taking like improv classes. Despite the fact that, we've been doing that for years in our own way, you know what I mean? But just wanted to learn the craft of it so that maybe you could bring something more to the table. And then, you get into the rudimentary improv class and you're like, what the fuck am I doing?
Hey, I've already been doing this on film.
Stolhansky took acting classes before Club Dread, and I think turned in a hell of a fucking performance in that movie. But he pushed me to go to acting classes with the same coach, and I'm like, all right. So I go, and I'm reading the lines that I wrote with all these guys, and she goes, I'm not sure the joke is there. I think it's here. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I mean, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. What are you talking about? And I'm like doing this poncy British accent, and I'm like, she's like, are you sure that's the accent you want to do? I'm like, come out of here.
Yeah.
This is
But
useless.
although on this movie we did have a dialect coach, and
Yeah.
it worked with everyone so that their British accents were somewhat respectable. And
Oh, that's gonna save you a lot of flack. I could just see the Twitterverse going crazy.
the Disney executives were very sensitive to our hunchback.
Oh, how he's played, sure.
Yeah,
'Cause
but he's a hero, right? Like he's the hunchback hero in our movie. Disney's made a movie called, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So, they eventually got their minds around it.
They sent us examples of things we could not do so that we did not tread on the animated hunchback, like the color of his wardrobe and that kind of stuff. So
from like an IP perspective, they
and also,
they have
like,
that character.
it's also
They
like an
own-
internal thing where they didn't want one division of Disney to be making fun of another division of Disney. So it was like, don't tread on, this, our hunchback, our animated hunchback movie is iconic. Don't tread on it. Don't make fun of it.
Oh, wow.
That kind of a thing.
And yet, you guys, we did that that real clear homage to the animation in when the hunchback is outside the bar and he's feeling blue and he looks in the water. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He sees his reflection and then he just wipes away his own reflection. It's like it's right out of the cartoon or animation.
But I'm trying to think. Disney, they were associated with this film too, or it was just
Disney. I mean, not to get wonky on you, Hayes, but Disney and kind of bought the film division of Fox, right? So they bought. So Searchlight, which we had worked with for years for Super Troopers, was always on the Fox lot, and now they have been kind of bought by Disney, and now they're on the Disney lot. So they have all the 20th century stuff over at Disney now.
That's so
our
absurd.
bosses who used to be Fox are now Disney, which is a whole other thing, which is like, not offending the mouse and, that kind of stuff.
I mean, you guys are just messing around, having this idea for a movie, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with like major IP lawyers in studios.
Well, Disney, it's now going to be Walt Disney's Super Troopers 3.
You laugh, but it is going to be that.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get that little logo and all that stuff, but
The Magic Castle.
They won't, but they'll fucking, they're going to eat Hulu, and all that shit will be through the Disney, the Disney portal.
That's full circle. When you're going around offices trying to get the initial thing made, you wouldn't even be able to get a pitch at Disney.
Yeah.
And now they're going to do.
One of the funny things also is, without giving anything away from the movie, there's a scene in the movie with a scrotum, and so we made this prosthetic scrotum, and the day we shot that scene, it just happened to be the day that the studio was visiting, and we had the two presidents of the studio on the set, and while we're shooting the scrotum scene, and they were so happy to be there, and they took the scrotum and they posed for pictures with it, draped it over their shoulder. There are all kinds of these funny, and it's like the heads of these studios. Really, when you get down to it, they, that's what they want, right? Right? The Disney affiliation. They want to take a picture with a scrotum as a joke.
We were worried, and I wasn't in that particular shot, and so I was told that presidents are coming, run interference, so that they don't really see the whole thing happening. But I couldn't really keep them away from the set. And so we end up there, and I'm like, well, sorry. And Kevin, who's directing the film, is, involved in the scrotum scene. And I'm like, this is the first time they're seeing him on set. And I'm like, this is bad. This is bad. But they loved it.
But they fucking loved it. They loved it. That was their favorite picture.
Yeah, I mean, Searchlight loves a good period piece. I think that's what it comes down to. They like... they like putting a movie in Europe. They like turning the clock back. That's their thing. So we were happy to get the chance to do it for sure.
Staying right in line with their award-winning, reputable films. That's what we're doing.
I don't know how that one got through. I feel that place especially would be so scared.
I don't either.
Well, the way it got through is that we make money for Searchlight. As much as
That's so
we would
great.
typically be looked at as these like R-rated body filmmakers. We're not the problem over there. We make money. And so they're like, well, if we make another movie with these guys and they make money, we can make, we can make Enchanté 2 or whatever, right? I mean, they make some great movies. I'm just sort of kidding, but you know what I mean? They can fund some of these more artsy films with the receipts of our films.
They were making movies at the time like Quills and Le Divorce, movies like that, and then they bought our movie and we're like, what the fuck? So we've always kind of been their redheaded stepchild.
Yeah, they never really had the poster up in the early years. They would never, even though we made some good money for them, but they wouldn't put that poster up. And I think they have it up now. They might have 2 up now. So,
Not on Disney, man. Not on the Disney lot.
Not on the Disney lot. What can you tell us about Tacoma FD season 4?
We just finished. We just finished season 4, and we shot. Let's see. Last year we finished in the fall, and then I've been in post on it. So, and we just finished. We did 13 episodes, and they're going to air this summer, and we haven't gotten the date yet, but we're anxiously awaiting our date. But they're all in the can. They're all edited and ready to roll. So a lot of people have been concerned about, if we're doing more. I don't know if we'll do more, but we've got a whole season in the can ready to show people.
You shoot them all at once?
Yeah, we shoot it kind of like film. We spend about 16 weeks. It takes to shoot about 13 episodes. And so we kind of do it in chunks, since Lemmy and I are on camera. We're in kind of every facet, directing on camera and writing, whatever. So we take about 3 or 4 months, then we write the whole season, then we shoot the whole season, then we edit the whole season, and try to avoid kind of overlappy stuff. So so this particular season we finished shooting in September, and then we've been editing for 6 months on it. So
have you found the fan base of with firemen? Like you did with the police officers, where you get approached on the street or they're hip to it and they want to talk to you about the show?
Oh yeah, it's huge. They love it. I mean, they have a different thing. Like the cops, they have a different thing. Like firefighters have a thing where they always want to lift you up. They want to pick you up, like physically. Like I'll be walking down the street like, and they want to grab you and they want to lift you, because that's what firefighters do.
The firemen carry it over the shoulder.
Stop! Don't. And we went to an event up at Tacoma, and we, part of our show is about, central to it is a woman in the fire department, which is an unusual thing. And so we met all these women firefighters, this group of women firefighters, and we were at this party, and they wanted to lift me up, and they were like, "Let's go, we're lifting him up," and I'm like, don't lift me up. I tell you, I know how this goes, and so. They did. They lifted me up. We have a picture of it. They lifted me up, and we posed for pictures. And this poor woman, I could just feel, she was like probably under this part of my body trying to hold me. And I could feel her. I could feel her starting to shake, And I was like, you could don't. But they just wanted to pick you up, But these guys, they're great. There's 4 million firefighters in the United States, and they've become like these, like avid fans of this show, because it's like Super Troopers in the sense like cops, people like to see you portray them as funny people that you want to hang out with.
Well, also the element of the fire station, because I watched the first couple seasons, and the downtime that takes place, it's like you're in almost like an office job until that alarm goes off.
It's a fraternity, and it's also like these firehouses, it's all family people, like it's like cousins and brothers and uncles. So it's like this weird kind of family thing where everyone's very comfortable with each other, and it, allows for you to have to fuck around a lot. And I think that's what firefighters like, the Chicago 911s of the world or whatever it is like, firefighters with soot crying, that kind of stuff. And the muscular guy, whatever. They want to see you pulling the prank on the kid in the fucking garage, So that was really kind of like the focus of it. And it really kind of sparked with those people. And then it ends up being endless stories. Like every time we meet a group of firefighters, they have like 10 great stories.
Oh, they give you the stories of how they're in the firehouse, how they're hazing
oh, this one on this guy, and we made this guy get a tattoo and whatever it is, and they tell you because they're fucking crazy. They're crazy people, and they tell you these stories. And like, wow, Jesus, that's like.
Did you guys ever do that joke that guns and hoses joke?
No, the was it a we've had cops and firefighter rivalry every season, but we never did that Guns and Hoses thing. Was a hockey, I think it was a hockey tournament, right? Where
Yeah, it was a hockey tournament between the cops and
yeah,
the firemen, and they called it guns and hoses.
yeah, no,
Um,
we did softball and boxing. We did a boxing against
uh-huh.
the cops.
And we got all these great Tacoma actors in Quasi.
But it was that funny thing where like we were in between seasons and everyone was just kind of hanging around waiting, and it was like, well, come do a part on this, And they would show up, and there wouldn't even be a script for them, but we'd have fun. Every one of them's it has a trailer moment, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to act with. Obviously I'm not involved in Tacoma FD, but I look at it and I'm like, I think if I were in that show, I'd probably be in that Gabe part. And I was like, and so I'm acting with Gabe in these scenes and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the guy I would have played that guy.
Yeah, I mean, Eugene is, I mean, obviously he was in your film and
Eugene Cordero was in Easter Sunday, and then he's obviously in Tacoma FD.
But he's like other level funny, you know what I mean? He's like one of those guys.
Yeah.
One of the many fun elements of making Super Troopers 2 with you guys was having Brian Cox on set and we'd be hanging out at the hotel lobby after a long shoot day, having beers and laughing and yucking it up. And he would come into the hotel and Brian, come over, hang out with us. And he'd go, good God, no, I'm going to bed.
No, I know, he was a lovable curmudgeon. And, since then, he's had so much success on Succession since we shot together with him,
Right.
and it's kind of like, tough getting him on the phone. The funny thing is he does our narrator character in Quasi. And, it's kind of a little Easter egg where we have this kind of narrator who leads in and takes you out of the movie. And in that kind of storybook way, and we were trying to figure out who to do it. And we ultimately were like, let's try to get Cox to do it. But it's like, oh, he's so busy and he's hard to get in touch with. And so I sent him an email and I was like, hey, Brian, and I sent this really nice, hey, we would love for you to do this voiceover. It won't take much of your time, blah, blah, blah. Never heard back from him. He never responded. And then we get a call from his agent who said, he'd spoken to Brian. He said, anything you guys want, he'll do it. And in my mind, I'm like, why don't you just fucking respond to my email, Brian?
Right.
Why don't you do that? And but regardless, he came. We got him in a studio in New York, and he, now he does like McDonald's and Virgin Atlantic, and he does all these voiceover work. Right. We got him on a day where he was doing a stretch.
Essentially, he took a flyer on you guys, years ago by being in that first one. Yeah. It's your first film. He's an established stage actor. He's Uncle Argyle. He's in huge stuff. Yeah. He comes in and plays the captain. And so when Super Troopers 2, he's just like, it's a miracle that everything's still going on. Yeah. He comes back in to play again. He's like, I can't believe these idiots are still going.
I know. And he loved it. And like, I remember talking to him the night of the premiere of Super Troopers 2 in New York. And he had such a great time. And he never watches his own movies. He's one of those guys, But he sat through the screening and he had laughs and he had a great time. And I think he's a little bit charmed. He enjoys the comedy because he doesn't get to do straight up comedy, right? And I think he enjoys that. So he did this. So we got him to come do this voiceover thing, and he was so curmudgeonly. He was on the phone. I was here. He was in New York, and we're talking like this, and he was so curmudgeonly, but in a kind of a lovable way. He made fun of everybody. He ripped everyone. Right. He did his voiceover in like 10 minutes, and then he was out.
First of all, we did the voiceover because we were trying to it's like an homage to the Highlander, right?
You have your voiceover pull you in and take you out. They do it in like Conan too, like they do.
Brian, he approached us to be Captain O'Hagan in Super Troopers. Because he always thought he was going to have Jerry Lewis's career when he started. And nobody, and then he got cast as Hannibal Lecter in the original one, and he was like, now he couldn't be in any comedies. And then he did Wes Anderson's movie, but he had a stroke, so he was kind of barely really. And so we were looking at that, and we're like, I don't know, is this guy funny? And we're like, man, pretty funny in this thing, but it wasn't super clear that he knew his way around a joke.
But at that time, you wanted any kind of reputable actor to give some
Well,
sort of
yeah,
your
we
movie.
had actually, remember, we tried the only other guy we tried was Bill Murray, and we said we called Bill Murray's agent, who, whatever, at CAA, and we said, and she goes, "I got the script," and I said, "Okay, so here's the offer." It's like 75 or 100 grand, and she goes, "That's not enough," and she goes. And I said, just get him to read it and see what happens. She goes, great, I'll get him to read it. But here's how Bill works. He calls me from a payphone once every 6 months. If I'm at my desk, I get to talk to him. If I'm not, it's probably going to be another 6 months. So let's hope I'm at my desk in the next, who knows, 6 months. And if he calls, I'll offer him your 75 grand. And then we'll wait for him for about a year and a half for him to read your little script. Or you can move on right now. And I was like, ah. And so then Brian Cox is like, I want to do it. We're like, yeah, okay, fine, let's go for it.
Like, that's arguably why Brian's so funny in the movie and with you guys, because he's playing a drama. I mean, he's not trying to be funny. He's frustrated. The stakes are high. He's tired of your antics, and the same way he was in the lobby and on set when he would hang out. It's just the same relationship, but you're filming it. He's the adult in the room.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, he made us look legitimate. Like, we're in scenes with Brian Cox, and I think people must have been like, I guess these guys are legit then, because he's legit. Because these guys, I don't know, sure. And that's how it kind of, he raised us up. And I think what we did for him is we just put him into a comedy space for people to go, yeah, that guy's a legit comedy guy. And I think together we all, that's why we all split all that McDonald's voiceover money, right, Kevin?
Yeah. But I tell you, I mean, like he says, he gives to the credit of Super Troopers, he says it's kind of the most, up to Succession probably now. It was prior to Succession, he was the thing he got most recognized from. He said people would stop him on the street for Super Troopers, and he was always very kind of proud of that. And then I think when he came back to the second one, he elevated us again because he still had more stature than we had. And
that was right. Succession was coming out, too.
He was in the Bourne Supremacy or Bourne Ultimatum,
X-Men, and after Super Troopers.
But the reason we really loved him is Uncle Argyle.
Oh yeah.
First you learn how to use this, then you'll learn how to use this. Whatever that was.
Yeah.
Good. So good.
I shall have to remedy that.
Yes. I've written a friend of mine, Kate Angelo, and I have written half of a Scottish golf movie that turns into sort of the Hangover kind of thing. And Brian Cox is, I'm going to ask him to be in that movie.
I've told this story before, but on that Super Troopers 2 set, that night in the conference room where we were shifting from shooting days to shooting nights.
Right.
And we really, we had to stay up all night because we wanted to get on our sleep schedule.
Revisionist history, I feel like.
We're so dedicated to making the product.
Yeah.
And we ended up staying up all night in the conference room. We didn't trash the conference room, but we thought it would be funny if this actual conference, there was an insurance conference in town at the Westin, if they came into the room for their morning meetings and it was all trash. So we slow trashed it. We slowly put the chairs on the table. We staged it to make it look like we had thrown the chairs all over. And one of the things that came out of that night, which I still tell, I just told last week, was we did the Danny DeVito. Somebody in the room at some point made the joke that they didn't know that the same Danny DeVito from Always Sunny in Philadelphia was the same Danny DeVito from Taxi.
Yeah.
And it was just in this maelstrom of madness that someone had mentioned that. And I didn't know that one of you guys was in the corner taking notes about that particular bit. And 2 days later, I showed up for work and I saw the pages for this new scene that wasn't in the Super Troopers 2 script.
Yeah.
And we were going to shoot a scene where these guys didn't know that Danny DeVito was really in.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that never happens on a project that's already going where you make space for new scenes.
It was not in the script originally. And yeah, I think it was built over like 2 nights. And
It
it's
was.
that night. And then the next night it was like, yeah, I remember like we would hang out in the parking lot of the hotel and people would drink, beers and have a joint or whatever it was. And I remember we were all standing around and we were talking about the Danny DeVito thing that had happened and like riffing even further on it. And then, yeah, we went and we just wrote it out. Because, you always want that chuff. You want that downbeat of what you guys are talking about when the action starts. Right. And sometimes that ends up overwhelming, the actual narrative elements of the scene or whatever. And so that was that situation. And we were shooting that and we were having fun or whatever. And, those are those things where you're watching, you're like, that's not going to be in the movie.
That's definitely not. No, it's not on the story.
We were in the edit room. We edited that scene together. And we're like, this is a really funny scene, but there's no way it's going to stay in the movie. I mean, it's got nothing to do with anything.
It came out of nowhere, out of madness.
It's my favorite scene in that movie now because you get so angry and, Sasso eggs you on so well. And, it was one of those kind of, beautiful lightning in a bottle moments. I felt like that, comes out of nowhere.
So
I mean,
and those guys being Canadian, Tyler Labine and Will Sasso actually being Canadian and doing a French Canadian accent because they had the beef with French Canadians themselves. They wanted to make fun of French Canadians because they're not. They're just Canadians, and there's this whole thing. So they wanted to send up the French Canadians, and every time Will would do that accent, I would just fall over laughing.
It was so good, and it's funny because like I don't know if you remember he would do this thing where you'd start him, and he could go from each like time zone or each area of Canada, like from west to east, from Vancouver to Nova Scotia, and do like 6 different accents. Right. Down the line, and he just go bang, bang, bang. It's like Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, and he would just switch the accent, and you're like, holy fucking shit, that's so genius. And so when he would find that accent in there, and it's in the bloopers, he'd have certain mouth things that he would try to do in order to find that accent. He'd go, he'd keep doing that kind of shit. And it just became so fucking funny.
Right. It was like a lawnmower being tuned up. When he was going through every region to find the one that he was doing.
Yeah. He sent me a video of the Prime Minister of Canada who somehow was a French Canadian at some point. And he goes, this is the accent I'm going to do. I'm like, all right. He goes, you're not going to understand a word I'm saying. I'm like, well, okay, but we have to have certain words. And I'm like, okay, we'll try it. And he goes, I'll set up jokes, but those are the only things you're going to understand what I'm really saying. The setups for jokes. And I'm like, okay, fine, fuck it. I mean, fuck it, right?
You can see it where it would be like, oh, you know what? It's too thick. I can't understand a fucking word you're saying. Yeah. And then he would just pull back a little bit or like hit like a few certain words specifically so you could understand what the sentence was or whatever.
Yeah. Danny DeVito... the reason that whole thing came up was because I told the story of how I had run into him at the Directors Guild of America dinner. Every year, they have a feature film dinner. You should go to that, Kevin. I met John Landis there, and I met Ivan Reitman, and I met Todd Phillips. You meet everybody. Everybody's there. Danny DeVito, his company, Jersey Films, is the producer of Super Troopers, mostly in name. They put their name on it so that Pete Langell would give us the money. He's like, I'll do it if Danny DeVito puts his name in the movie. So he puts his name in the movie. They weren't really involved in the development or they're just, nominal producer. And so, which we appreciated. And so, but I'm the one who signs the Super Troopers checks because that's just how that it was. I'm like, every year I sign these 2 checks. I signed Kevin's check. I signed my own check. I signed Dan DeVito's check. I signed John Landgraf's check, who's the head of FX. So I'm writing this guy checks, right? I mean, big checks. And I've run into him in the bathroom of the DGA event. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to him in the bathroom. But then I come out and I'm like, hey, Danny. And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, it's Jay Chandrasekhar from Super Troopers. And he goes, and I'm like, you Jersey Films? And he goes, oh, yeah. I produced that picture. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, a lot of people telling me I should see that movie. This is 15, 16 years later. I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm writing this motherfucker checks. And so I told that story, and people are like, well, we should put a scene in this movie that mentions him so much that he has to see Super Troopers 2 just to find out what the scuttlebutt's about.
Yeah, I wonder if you've seen it. I wonder if you've seen it.
I love Danny DeVito. I love the guy, but I was like, let's get him back. Let's get him.
Hey, did you take any grief because you played a Canadian and you aren't a Canadian, and those two guys were really Canadians? Because you didn't do the French Canadian accent. You did more like the. It's like
I did the more of a Great Lakes
accent, kind of like a Chicago.
Great Lake. I found a lot of people from Toronto sound like Chicago.
Yeah.
Like a Wisconsin, Toronto, Chicago.
It was like the Dan Aykroyd. The Dan Aykroyd.
It was the Dan Aykroyd, and then listening to a lot of. One of my favorite things are these post-game hockey interviews when you hear the hockey players talk, and those guys just have a classic way of talking. So I was just ripping hockey players.
And did those guys give you shit for faking your Canadianism or no?
The only guys that gave me shit were Tyler and Will.
Yeah.
They were. That was a big leap for me to play a Canadian. I was like, you guys have been playing Americans, Australian actors play all our superheroes. I mean, come on.
I think you did a fucking great job.
I would say this about all of you guys, but you're my favorite Canadian Mountie. Now, I temper that because I would say that to Sasso, and I would also say that to Tyler. But you guys are fucking great in that movie. I don't know what to tell you. I love that trio. Super Troopers came out. Okay, we were at Sundance. We were the best. We were the only film to sell for a week. Everyone's talking about our movie. We were like the darlings of Sundance. We sell the movie to Searchlight. Everybody loves us. The screenings, 3 midnight screenings, everyone's like having a ball. We're like the next big thing. A year later, the film comes out, and the New York Times gives a pretty bad review. And then the other reviews come in, and they're largely pretty bad. We get 35% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and I am fuming, right? I'm like, what? I mean, we killed at Sundance, and and I'm like, who are these reviewers? Like, do they smoke weed? Do they like R-rated movies? How do we know there's no context here. They're just people who are good writers who have jobs at newspapers. When we made Beerfest, a movie that got a 36% fresh rating, one of the reviews was from a woman who had a site called Grandma's Reviews. And Grandma out of Arizona was like, I didn't like Beerfest because I thought there was too much drinking. And I'm like, Grandma, it's an ode to binge drinking. I mean, what are you reviewing this movie for? And why are we getting dinged on your little review?
Oh, because her review is factored into the Rotten Tomatoes algorithm.
And so at that moment, I'm like, I'm getting revenge on these motherfuckers at Rotten Tomatoes. I'm getting revenge. I didn't know how. And so 16 years, I stewed on this fucking thing. And finally, I'm like, I'm going to make an app, right? I'm going to make an app. And I started outlining this app, right? And the app, I eventually met up with these two guys who had this same exact idea, but for Amazon and Yelp. They're like, who writes these Yelp reviews? Who writes these Amazon reviews? And so the premise is, it's basically the Instagram of recommendations. It's called Vouch Vault, and you can get it on the App Store and the Android store right now. We've been up and running for about 5 months. We got something like 9,500 people. And so the premise is, if you guys follow me, I will vouch for, a movie I love, a television show I love, a documentary I love, a restaurant I love, a song I love, a band, anything I love. So if I don't love it, I don't vouch for it. I don't put it in there. And so you can instead of wondering what the New York Times guy thinks, who you don't even know if he smokes weed. You don't know if he likes R-rated movies. When I say I like an R-rated movie, you're like, well, he also liked Caddyshack, and he also liked Animal House, and he also vouched for The Hangover. I think I probably understand that I'm going to like this movie too. It's the curated everything. And it's recommendations from people you know and trust. Not only celebrities, but your friends. If your friends, like a group of friends, it's like those text chains you have, that go back 20 years. You're like, watch this movie, right? And then you're on Friday, you're like, oh, what movie was that? And you're looking through the text chain. It's all in this Vouch Vault app. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, when you go on to one of the streamer websites, Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, it's overwhelming to navigate what to watch. It's an endless library, and you're presented with one show or one movie, and people usually just click on that. It's hard to get deep on the content to figure out what to watch.
Yeah, and
robots, your friends. You usually it's word of mouth, right?
Yeah, it's word. We built sort of a word of mouth machine where you're like, I trust this friend, so I'll read this book. Instead of some robot at Netflix saying the robot thinks you're going to like this movie, and I'm like, I don't think I will. I don't know. I don't know if I trust your sense of humor, robot. But
you watch one fashion makeover show,
right?
Boom, let me tell you,
exactly. Or your wife watches it on your account, and now you're fucking swimming in.
You messed up my algorithm.
So Vouch Vault app is sort of sponsoring our show, and so we're gonna ask. I'll start us off. Okay, there's a song that I'm going to vouch for, and it's by this woman named Little Sims, Simz, and she did a song called Point and Kill, and she does it with this African guy named Obanjiayer, and it's super kick-ass. And we're going to play that in the edit of this. We'll play that song, and now we've heard that song, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty good song, right? And okay, so this movie I really like is it's called A Futile and Stupid Gesture. It's starring Will Forte, our old buddy Will Forte, Kevin, who, by the way, Will Forte went to USC or UCLA?
UCLA.
And this dude can chug a beer faster than everybody in Broken Lizard. Isn't that right, Kevin? He beat us all?
He doesn't have a good stamina, but he's like a he can hit hard and fast, but he doesn't last. He didn't last.
But A Futile and Stupid Gesture was directed by David Wayne, who is a really talented filmmaker. He made that great film about the spas that Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd were in. It was called Wonderlust. I love that movie. But David Wayne made this movie, Futile and Stupid Gesture, about the founding of the National Lampoon. It starts at the Harvard Lampoon, and the real person who went to Harvard, his last name is Kenny, and he graduated. And they go to New York City. They make the National Lampoon. Out of the National Lampoon comes National Lampoon Radio, and then from there, Saturday Night Live took a bunch of the players from National Lampoon, like Belushi and O'Donnell, who's like one of the writers, and Chevy Chase, played by Joel McHale, my buddy Joel McHale, and then they decide to make a movie, so they make Animal House, and then they make Caddyshack, and all of this is in this movie, and it's such a good. If you're a comedy fan, this is a great movie. This is a really great movie.
Yeah, I saw it. I mean, I read the book, which was really great. I read the book many years ago, and it's about Doug Kenny, who basically kind of started National Lampoon, or helped it rise to prominence. And you can see I think he died young, right? Did he die young, that guy?
Well, he died. He fell or jumped off a cliff in Maui. Yeah. He was going out there to try to dry out, and he was going to dry out with Chevy Chase, who was his buddy. Yeah. And I think Chevy was I think he always said he was the worst guy to try to dry out with because he was a heavy cocaine user and a drunk. So I think they didn't dry out.
He's in Animal House. He plays that character Stork. It's like, what do you think we're supposed to do, you moron? He has Doug Kenny plays that guy. He was, This guy
Doug Kenny.
who's a comedy writer. Yeah.
And I believe that's on
This
Netflix.
this movie came out a couple years ago, right?
Yeah. It was a Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was one of the first kind of like, not first, but like when Netflix was started doing original movies. It was kind of in that camp, and had a lot of people playing these kind of cameo, or not cameo, these real life, characters, which was kind of fun, I thought.
Well, I've got a couple things to vouch for in different categories from Mike. I just was thinking of stuff that I was into right now, but in the vein of comedy and content and period pieces like Quasi, I've been watching History of the World Part 2 on Hulu, which they release them 2 at a time in consecutive days, and I watched all of them straight, laughing the whole time. It's in the vein of obviously the first History of the World, but it almost feels like Mr. Show a little bit. They're interweaving characters, and you're following long sketches throughout multiple episodes, and they killed it. And I couldn't imagine a bigger rock to push up the hill than taking on Mel Brooks' History of the World to remake it.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic and super funny. And
Didn't you say that Mel Brooks demanded that it look like the original?
I think the one caveat, I was talking to Ike and Dave about it, and the
Ike Barinholtz
Ike Barinholtz and Dave Stassen, 2 guys I went to grade school with, I'm like, you guys are doing the Mel Brooks, you're doing the movie that like made us all laugh. Yeah. I think the one thing that they had was it had to look like the original sketches in the film.
Yeah.
It had to look like the original film. And it's just so great. And it just all came out. And
I watched the first episode. I laughed a lot. There's because there's so many great people in it. It's Sasso's in that first episode I saw.
Right.
And a lot of great people. And it's funny because for us and guys our age, I think that movie was very seminal, for me, certainly, where that, like, when cable first started and that History of the World would play over and over again, we would watch it and we would quote it. And it was that, that kind of a movie. And my son is now that age. And, for me, like when I watch History of the World, it's like I think of it through the context of that movie, and it's Mel Brooks and it has that vibe of Mel Brooks, And it's not like new to me, but like to him, this was like and so we watched it together, and there's a great bit with Kumail about the Kama Sutra, and he was just fucking laughing his ass off because that, seeing it through the eyes of a 14-year-old boy, was really fun to me, which is what I loved about it, and he fucking loved it. He laughed his ass off at it. So it had a great vibe, a great living vicariously through, remembering what it was like to be his age and watching that. It was fun.
Yeah, but it's new. So like when I show my son and daughter old movies, I'm going into the old stuff. They're like, all right, this isn't happening right now.
Yeah.
The fact that it comes back around, it's like they feel
this is his era. This is his, it's his time, which is great.
That was a great sketch. It was Karma Suptra. He was pitching
Kama Sutra.
Pitching a soup company.
With the Kama Sutra, so he'd have soup in sex pictures.
And they love the idea. They say, "Can we lose the soup?"
Yeah.
Can we lose the soup?
And that's how
we'll just take this to sexual positions.
Yeah.
Karma Sutra.
And it goes on. I mean, it gets even deeper when they go back into the sketches of the Civil War, and you're following them around with the treaties. It's just, it's like a little bit when I show my son, it's like a history lesson for him. He hears about, characters in the Bible or generals in the Civil War. And he's like, oh, wait, you can make fun of these guys?
And who directed those things?
They're kind of like sketches, it's kind of a sketch show put together, right? But I think didn't Ike direct some? And
yes, Stassen directed a lot.
Yeah.
I think maybe Nick Kroll was the first one to get the project, and he put together a bunch of funny people, and they all wrote it and did it together.
I like Nick Kroll. What else? Do you have another one, Hayes? You vouching for something else?
You don't have to. Yes, a cool story. My friend during the pandemic started a pretzel company, like like big giant pretzels with salt on them.
Love
Love
it.
them.
And it's like, okay, Shappy's Pretzels. It's like great. He's got
I'm
a
gonna write it
side
down.
hustle. He's a hilarious actor and performer. His wife's a great actress. So he starts Shappy Pretzels, and good for him. I'm following around. I had some. They're great, and hadn't had a new pretzel in a long time. Felt like an open lane. And then I was just watching the award ceremony, the movie award ceremonies, and I'm following Chappie on Instagram. And everyone at the Oscars had a pretzel under their seat.
Really? And it
Yeah.
was his pretzels?
It was his pretzels.
Wow.
So like he's getting like interviewed on the red carpet, and his wife Katie had a hilarious phrase. She's like, "Well, I guess I'm the queen of pretzels now." And I'm like, what a great thing to be a queen of.
Amazing. I love to try Chappie's pretzels. We were sitting around the dinner table the other night with my kids, and they were, they're kind of, young adult, teenager kind of ages, and we were going through this. What would be if you were stuck on an island for the rest of your life? What 3 foods would you have with you? Whatever, silly little. And I said pretzels was one of my 3 foods, and my fucking kids went crazy. They thought that was the dumbest thing that they'd ever heard in their life. That of the 3 foods that I would bring, I love pretzels. That I would bring pretzels. They thought that was an incredibly missed opportunity. And
I love that you pick pretzels because it's the thing that makes you the most thirsty. And if you're on an island, fresh water.
I didn't think about that. But the thing is, I never get tired of pretzels, right? So like I'll get tired of other food, but hard, salty bread. I mean, who gives a shit? Right? I mean,
yeah.
I'm going to try that. How do we find those Chappie's pretzel?
It's an LA company. I think he just went on Gold Belly. He reshaped them too, because why not? Like, why is a pretzel shaped the way it's shaped? So I think it's in some form of an S, or I've got to ask him why it's shaped like
Are they
that.
C's now for chap? Like, what are you shaping them in?
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of a S shape to them. And
okay,
yeah.
Kevin, you got one?
I just binged. Did you guys watch Tulsa King?
With Stallone.
With Stallone.
I haven't seen that. Everyone says it's really good.
Fucking great. I watched it. I binged right through it, and it's on Paramount Plus or whatever. And it's Stallone as a mobster, and he gets released from prison, and he gets assigned by the mafia to go run an operation in Tulsa. And so he goes out to Tulsa, and he starts to try to put together a mafia operation in Tulsa. And it's really fucking great and funny. And it's got some friends in it. Martin Starr's in it, who's a friend of ours, is great. And Andrea Savage is great. She's in it. It's got this great cast. And it's funny because like I love Stallone. But he has a certain flavor, right? Stallone has a certain flavor, right? So, and this is a new flavor that you haven't really seen of Stallone. Like, I feel like when you watch movies, you always are wanting a little more. Like in this, it's Stallone. Every scene, happy, sad, finding his dreams, crying, beating people up. There's so much Stallone in it that it just makes me really happy to have that much. And he's fucking great. But it's just it's got comedy, and it's got some action and some ass kicking, and I fucking love it.
What made me pause, and now that you've described it, I'm going to watch it. But what made me pause was, if you remember Tango and Cash, which we've seen something like 7,500 times. Stallone was going through a period where he's like, I don't want to play a tough guy all the time, So he was trying to play like a banker in that movie.
Yeah. He's a pulled together guy. Yeah,
he's super cut, and he's an investment banker. And he put a pair of little glasses on, and you're like, he is a banker, I guess. And you're like, we always made fun of him a little bit for pretending to be a banker, and so. But we love that movie. Love that movie, right?
And that's like what it is, and whatever you think of, like Stallone, they lean into it, right? So like he has that certain look now where he's kind of like it's not plasticky, but he has that kind of a look, and his hair is dyed and whatever. But they don't care. They lean into it because that's his character, and so he's
Right.
not trying to hide anything.
I was worried that he was going to try to do a Tulsa accent. And I'm like, I don't know. Is this going to be the banker thing again? So I'm like, he's going to, yeah, howdy, y'all. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get into that. But now that I know he went out there as a mobster.
He's a guy from Brooklyn, and it's a great character. And, he's charming, and he's kind of interesting. And, I think Stallone, like one of his best movies is Copland. I don't know if you guys remember Copland.
Right,
where he
that was Mangold.
Yeah. And it was like, you rooted for the guy in that,
Yeah.
and in this, he has some elements of that, in that you're rooting for a guy who has some flaws, but he's a tough guy and a badass and can solve any problem, kind of a thing. And it's good. It's really fucking good. It's very bingeable.
When you look at Stallone's career, the first Rocky, have you guys seen the first Rocky in
Yeah.
a while?
I rewatched it, a movie he wrote and starred in and not directed, but wrote and starred it. Incredible.
And it's so slow. It's like a true independent character.
It's it's a slow, talky character piece.
Very little fighting until the end.
Yeah.
When you look at what Rocky's become now, it's
it's like a Happy Meal now, or whatever.
2 was an escalation, 3 was, and now we're in like 9, and I think they're doing like Japanese anime fighting in the new Creed. It's become a whole other universe. But when my son turned 11, he was rowdy boy. All his boys are boys. And I had a movie theater that was this old kind of opera house that had a screen. And I asked the camera guy, I was like, hey, can we show a movie for kids here? Guy's like, sure. So he invites 18 boys to his birthday party. And he just met these kids. And I say, what movie do you want to screen for them? And that's a big question. That's a lot of, so I'm trying, he's like, well, I don't want to do something new because we could already see that in the theaters. And so I showed him the trailer for Rocky IV. This was last December.
That's the Drago one.
That's the Drago one. And it was also before the real world Russians were bad guys again, right? They had not, people paying attention knew they were the bad guys, but they hadn't invaded the Ukraine until a couple months later.
They've been keeping it together. They've been keeping it together.
The Cold War never ended.
It wasn't Cold War.
Motherfucker. Yeah, it wasn't cold. We thought we're friends. It's over. They're like, no. They're hanging out in the corner.
Yeah.
So I show him the trailer. He's like, absolutely. We get the theater. We're watching the movie. At the end of it, it's just so much punching. Rocky IV is all punching and patriotism.
Oh yeah.
They charged the stage and they didn't know people did this when it came out a million years ago, and we're chanting Rocky, Rocky. So great birthday party. It's such a fun time. My son says to me afterwards, he goes, wait, but Dad, one thing, I don't get it. Like, were the Russians bad guys? and then this was December of last year.
But it has such a Cold War vibe to it. That, like, there's the speech he makes at the end where he's like, I thought things about yous thought things about me. Yeah. And we come together. There was like
if you can change, if I can change, you can change. We all can change.
Yeah. It's fucking great.
It was a piece. I feel like the CIA must have financed Rocky IV. It was a piece of propaganda.
There's a little bit of propaganda.
I loved all that propaganda. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I love that movie.
It was great, and hopefully we can make the Russians bad guys in the state of Russia, not the people. But they should be bad guys in movies again, right?
Movies were better when the Russians were bad guys. Period.
Yeah, those Wagner guys, make those guys the fucking bad guys.
Yeah. It's great if the Russians are bad.
Or like that we went through that phase of like nebulous foreign enemies where there was no nationality. We were just against bad people of the world.
Right.
We need.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be the bad guy anymore, right? And you're like, come on.
Yeah, no, not with trade agreements tying us all together. We can't have a real bad guy.
How are we going to sell the movie over there? But luckily, the Russian market for movies is zero for us.
Yeah.
So we can make them the bad guys. When the Chinese, though, you can't make the Chinese the bad guys because we're making a lot of money over there from the fucking Chinese, right?
You got to tint the windows in the plane so you can't see the nationality of the pilot.
Well, what's his name? Dan Dan Bradley, who was the second unit director on Dukes of Hazzard, he shot all those incredible car chases. He got a chance to remake Red Dawn. And the original bad guys in Red Dawn, I mean, it's like a kick-ass action movie. And Dan Bradley's the greatest action shooter in Hollywood, in my view. But he made this movie, and the bad guys were the Chinese, and they shot it, and they're like, "Wait a minute, they can't be the Chinese." And then they switched them. I don't know, I don't have this quite right, but I think they switched them to the North Koreans, and they're like, "Well, they might hack us." So then they switched them to like a non-specific group of bad guys, and they got rid of all the markings on the. And you're like, "What is going on? We just should have chose the Russians. They were sitting there the whole time."
Wasn't that the thing about Tom Cruise's flight jacket in Top Gun? It had a patch. Yeah. And then what did they do?
Well, it was a Taiwan. I think it was a Taiwan patch.
Right.
So they wanted to take that. Get rid
Isn't
of
that
that.
incredible?
But they put it back in. They're like, no, that's where he drew the line.
Yeah.
Maverick wears the Taiwan patch.
I might as well tell the story, and then we could end it, unless you got anything else, Hayes, of how we started calling Kevin Queen.
He referred to you as Queen when we were getting the equipment set up, and I'd heard him call you that, Kev, a million times. Never once occurred to me to ask, how did you get the name Queen?
So, well, there seems to be some dispute on what the story is, but Kevin and I will tell, because we're both there for the whole fucking history of everything involving our movies and everything. So we both have very distinct versions of the same story. And it's like Robert Evans says in his great book. There's what is it? It's there's three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth.
And they're all true. And they're all
true. That's right. We were juniors at Colgate University. We were living in our fraternity house, Theta Pi, and it was the winter. And I went into the bathroom, and Kevin had come out of the shower. And so it was the middle of winter, and Colgate's winters are just snow. So he was as white. He was like a sheet of paper white. He hadn't seen the sun in 6 months, right? And his hair had come out of the shower, so it was all tousled up in a big kind of bouffant kind of look, right? And there was steam on the window, on the mirrors, and he had this royal blue towel which he was wearing above his nipples, and I was like, This. I said, "You look like you're the fucking Queen of England getting out of the shower here." And so I told some other guys that they're like, "Fucking Queen of England over here." And we suddenly this nickname took off like a rocket, and he became. I mean, he quickly was not the Queen of England. It was just Queen, the Queen, and then. It just went it went out, like graduates of Colgate were calling him Queen, like the pledges were calling him Queen. I was at his house in Connecticut, and his mother's like, "Queenie, will you get me a beer?" And I'm like, "What? This is incredible." His mother. And then his father, he comes up to me, he goes, "There are certain connotations to the name Queen." And I'm like, no. This is the Queen of England. And he goes, and he kind of walks away. And I'm like, "No, it's the Queen of England, sir. It's the Queen of England." He's a judge. "It's Queen of England, Your Honor." And he goes, "I don't like it." But anyway, that's why we call him the Queen.
The way that I remembered it was more that there was a guy ahead of us, and he was the president of a fraternity. We used to call him the King, right? And then he graduated, and then I became the president of our fraternity. And as a joke, they started calling me the Queen because I was not the King. I was, the Queen.
I remember all that too.
I think the towel thing may have played into that, but that's really kind of what. And so it started as a fraternity nickname. And, with fraternity nicknames, the more you fight against it, the worse it becomes, right? So couldn't fight against. So, I resigned myself long ago to not worry that much about it.
Yeah, when Steve Lemmy is laughing hardest, he only calls you the Queen.
Yeah,
he goes, "Shut the fuck up, Queen."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he does it too. Yeah, he does it all through the shooting of Tacoma. And so then, the crew starts calling you that on Tacoma. And you're like, "Okay, hold on a second. I don't even know you. Just hold it." in that capacity, I can tell people not to call me certain things.
Right, you're the boss.
Yeah, but not in broken.
Call you queen behind your back.
Yeah, behind my back, they can make T-shirts and shit.
Which
they did. For the Slam and Salmon, the Grip crew made a T-shirt, a Queen T-shirt, when we were shooting Broken Lizard movie. The Grip crew did a picture of my face with Queen on it. So
I consider that nickname to be my greatest accomplishment.
Okay.
I guess we'll leave it at that. Thank you for being our first guest ever. I mean, my God. You
guys should call yourselves the Wood Background Podcast. Maybe that would be better.
Well, the wood background, you pointed that out. Jay had to get a different colored wood background than I had to get a different colored wood background based on just our skin tone.
Yeah, your complexion. Yeah.
Contrast.
Absolutely.
I like your wood background a lot. And I'm going to buy one of those too and see how that looks. Although I like the background I got. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway. Oh, by the way. Oh, yeah, there's Quasi. 420 Quasi.
420 Quasi.
Yeah. Well, by the way, Hayes, where's your fucking mustache? Hayes, where's your mustache?
Where's yours?
What?
Kev, where's your mustache?
I haven't. I like to shave it off as quickly as I possibly can.
It's mustache tails, guys. We got to have mustaches.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
We'll digitally put them on. We'll put them on.
Come on, like Henry Cavill or whatever. Didn't he have a mustache? Oh, he had to take it off.
He had a digital mustache.
Got it. Right. Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Later, guys.
All right, boys. Thank you very much.
Mustache Tales.